Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the last two sets of Skybox Impact, 1997 and then again in 2000. Skybox Impact was created in a time when you could get away with making a pretty basic card and just assuming that you were going to sell packs. You didn't have to do a whole lot, but in order to sustain one of these sets, you really had to kind of be on your toes in terms of figuring out what the hobby was going to need at any particular time, be that inserts, parallels, or even a stylistic change. So Skybox had been doing a pretty good job of kind of working with the basics of what Skybox Impact was, which was a basic card with a shot of a player, full bleed for the most part, and the background was always present, which for Skybox was pretty unusual. And Skybox Impact was always able to hold up with this. They were able to maintain that tradition throughout its entire history, although there were times when it would kind of play around with fading the background in order to have a little bit more of an effect that made it a little bit more unique in a very creative hobby, which the football industry was very much that way. You had to really earn your keep, and Impact was always kind of a struggle to see how they would do it. By 1996, there wasn't much of a place for Impact. It's not so much that it was crowded out as much as the whole world of football cards was just so lively and dynamic that a card set like this really had a tough go of it. It didn't have a good, healthy place. Now, the inserts for Impact were pretty good, but other than that, they really needed to look at the Impact card itself and say, well, what does this card need to be at this point? And they decided to shift over in a direction more along the lines of Skybox Premium, where they basically just got rid of the card background and put up a color image or a single color, or they basically replaced the background with something else. And that's exactly what Impact did for 1997. And what they did they didn't want to make it like Premium because they wanted Premium to be its own affair and look really professional. So for this, they wanted it to still have kind of the excitement that kids really gravitate towards. Even though it wasn't necessarily entirely intended for kids at this point, it was getting a little bit more into the middle range of the hobby, but they wanted to have that same feel. And so the cards they have, oh boy, are these dynamic cards. The card backs, the backgrounds behind the player shot is just a regular shot of the player, very heavily saturated, but the background, all of a sudden now it's this really dynamic, lively affair. All computer-generated images. Some of them were kind of like landscapes. Some of them were almost like lights moving around. Some of them were like terrors. It was just a feast for your eyes, primarily because of the colors. Really, really bright, rich, strong colors. And usually multiple colors on the card background. So these cards were very, very energetic, lively, flashy. And they did an amazing job of not burying the player. So the player always showed up. Every single card, you know who the player is, you see the player. But the background is just a big halo of excitement, which makes these cards almost too energetic, almost too fun, but it's the perfect balance. It was really amazing. And the thing that tied it together was right at the top of every card is the player's last name in big, bold, bright, single color with a bit of a fade. Every single card had that name, but the colors, all the colors were changing. No team had a pattern of colors, and even the name up the top was different from player to player. So the whole card was it was super fun. And in case you haven't noticed, down at the bottom they actually have gold foil for text. It's hidden in the card. But that fun, it really worked. And on the card back, amazingly, they were able to make a card back that was just sedate enough that it looks nice, kind of tames it, but still works with the front, so that you look at the back and you go, okay, yeah, I can see this belonging to this card set. But they also on the back were able to put a team color on the stripes on the side, so they actually did create something of a tie together. Overall, the card was amazing, and you look at this and go, boy, if they had done something like this before with Impact, it would have been a real trendsetter for the whole hobby. But at least they got to it, and you kind of get excited about what would be coming down the road. They did not, however, do a subset, which is a really unusual thing about Impact. Impact always had a subset. It always had at least one, and that was part of what really kind of carried you with set. But here they didn't bother to do that. They just did the players, they did the rookies and the checklist. And the rookies are just like the rest of the players. The only difference for the rookies is the fact that they have a big football in gold foil, which was kind of an inheritance from Fleer and Hoops. So other than that, it's just a player who's in his college uniform. So the set itself didn't need anything special because the whole set was special. I mean, it was really, really cool. But it was the mid to late 90s. You got to do something. And so what they did was to do a parallel called Rave. And the Rave cards are the same, except they replaced the gold foil with a raspberry foil. And then on the card back, they've got them serial numbered out of 150. Whole set. Pretty cool. You really didn't need to do any more, and they didn't. So that was what they did for the set. But hey, it is Impact, and they were doing some really great inserts at this point. And that starts off with Boss. Now, the Boss insert set is embossed. That's what it is. It's a very lively card in terms of all the stuff that's behind, but here they just did text. Whether it's the veteran, the rookie, whatever. A bunch of text on the back, but the embossing was the whole card. It was the text, it was the player, everything on the card. And that was the fun of it. But they also did a parallel of this too, and the parallel was called Super Boss. And in this case, the player himself remains just a glossy shot, but it's the whole, everything else in the card gets a chrome finish. That's the parallel. And then on the back, just in case you haven't quite figured it out, they have an SB after the number of 20 number on the card. So they're having a lot of fun. And then they really got carried away with the next insert set, which was accelerators. And with accelerators, this is a fully die-cut card. But more than that, they have some relief inside the card. So around the die cutting, they have this silver, well, it's all throughout the card, but they have this silver bordering that exists. And then there's a black area inside of that. And that's a matte finish, and it's textured. It's slightly relieved, textured, but this is not embossed. It is actually relieved into the card. So on the back, you don't feel it. On the front, you do. Really cool. But also kind of a tricky card, because not only is it a distinctive card, it's also slightly smaller than a regular card. So that means that this is, not only is it difficult to work with just in terms of there are a lot of areas, if you have multiple cards, there's no place to grab it, but the fact that it's slightly narrower and slightly shorter means that, I mean, there literally is no way for you to work with this cleanly with other cards unless there are other accelerated cards. But on the positive side, they don't have any little corners that can easily get snagged anywhere. So the card itself is well designed, really interesting, and it's not a danger to get in too much damage. Aside from the fact that there's a good chance this will slide out of a pile of cards quite frequently unless you're protecting it very specially. And so for me, with these cards, I have always kept them in a penny sleeve. The first time I get it, I always do that. And it also helps you to find them because it can be tricky to find where they're at. So that was the second insert set they did. And then on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, following that is our instant impact cards, which is a bunch of rookies. And this card is just a shocking letdown. In this case, they have the players in their college uniforms. They have a half-bleed card. They have a really boring white strip up at the top with the player name. Down at the bottom, they have a dark strip with chrome finish on it. The football helmet has a chrome finish, but that's it. This card, it makes no sense in this set. And so this is the card I have to point out and say, okay, just so you know, this goes with all those crazy cards. Why? Don't ask me, but it does. So, all right, that's where it is. Getting back to craziness, we got Rave Review. And Rave Reviews is, wow, this is an impressive card. This card is fascinating. None of the other cards are fascinating. They're eye-catching, they grab you. But with this card, the whole card is, well, aside from the player, the whole card has a rainbow holographic effect. But what's cool about it is that the whole background is dark areas with patches of light areas. And the way that the holographic effect, which affects even the dark areas, the way that it affects the dark versus the light and the fades from the dark to the light is all different. And so it has a holographic feel. As you move it around, the dark and light areas, it's kind of like they're moving at different rates. And so the card really does have a fascinating holographic feel that is fascinating to look at it. Because it's not like an optical illusion, and yet it really does have something that just kind of, that has you hanging on to it. So it's a lot of fun. But probably the most distinctive card of all of these, which is saying a lot, is their total impact card. And in this case, it's an acetate card, so it's plastic. But it's a really well done acetate card. This card doesn't tend to fade into a yellow as much as other cards do. And that's a good thing, because the whole idea of the card is that it's supposed to completely disappear. And then you have the player over on the side, and you have a little bit of the background ghosted in on the side. And then you have some elements that are kind of floating around. And so that the way that all of that works is kind of cool. And then you just have this big open area over on the side until you move the light just right. And then you get the light glinting off and showing you that, guess what? There's actually some text embossed into the side. And you don't see it for much of the time. And then all of a sudden you see it very clearly. And that's what's amazing about this card, is how subtly they put the total impact word on the side. I mean, it really is a draw. It grabs your eye and makes you just, well, in my case, it has me just in awe of just what they were able to pull off with that. It's really cool. So for the set, it was an amazing thing that they created. And you look at it and you just go, man, I can't wait to see what they do next year. And for next year, in 1998, what they would do is actually rebrand it as Skybox Thunder. Now, there's also some Z-Force that's in this card set as well. There are a few things that came into it, but Impact kind of turned into Thunder. So normally I would shift over and talk about that, but in this case, I actually don't want to, because they brought back the name of Impact in 2000. So I want to stick with that so that you understand it. And here with Impact, it wasn't Skybox Impact, it was just Impact. So it was as much a Fleer Impact as much as Skybox Impact. And they really didn't need to put any more branding onto it. It worked well enough just on its own, just as Impact. And the card itself is a very well done card, very simple. It's a full bleed card, which is a classic Impact kind of card. But in this case, they have a couple of, it's kind of like design lines. And then right around the outside, they have a ghosting of a color for the team. And it creates a border around the outside, but not completely. And then they have a little color box down at the bottom with a logo for the team. And that is what they put in for the design. And it's about as classic Impact as you can get, and yet it looks like the nicest Impact card that was ever created. So it's a great combination, and it looks really professional. If you put Skybox Premium on this, I would totally buy this as a Skybox Premium card. Very well done, very straightforward, and really no need for a parallel. And that was really cool for the year 2000, because here at 2000, you're at kind of a transition point. The craziness of the 90s was kind of dying off. We were heading into a new era, and we really didn't understand what that new era was going to be. And so this was a good bridge for Skybox to just make a great straightforward card with no frills. And even with the set, they really didn't do any gimmicks. Now, as with the previous set where the players were all spread out, so there was no team structure to it, here they did that as well. But also, interestingly, the rookies are also spread out throughout the set in a haphazard way, but the rookies look different. In this case, they got rid of the background for the rookies, and they just have an image of a helmet, kind of the face mask of a helmet, with a coloration for the team. And so for every single rookie, it's a very jarring break from the rest of these cards, and the rookies are basically in their college uniforms. And it was a cool component to the set simply because of how distinctive it was. But these cards right now these cards are heavily pursued, not because there's anything special about the cards, but because there's one particular rookie that just happens to be featured in this set. I'll let you guess who it is. And it means that right now this very basic set is a very sought after set. But other than that, it's a simple set that Skybox put together, and it was not intended to do anything other than just say, here's a simple set, and that's what it worked for. Even with the inserts, there wasn't a lot to it. So a set with no parallel. Here we have inserts that are really about as basic as it gets, starting with tattoos. Now these rub-on tattoos, this was something common in the 60s, but we really hadn't seen much past that. So it was a fun little thing that they threw in here just for kicks. And these are kind of an afterthought affair. One of these for each team. The cards are the same width of a regular card, but not the same height. So these are easy to slip out of a pile of cards. And they have a protective coat over the front, just a little sleeve to protect it. So it's actually the card back that has the logo itself. And the team logo, of course, is backwards because when you apply it, then it's got to be reversed. And so that's a fun little thing that you get to collect with this, which isn't really all that sought after, so you don't run into them very often, but they were common enough. They were kind of throwaway affairs. Then they had their point of impact insert set. And this is a normal size card, normal height, but it has an arc die cut into the top. And then the whole card is themed of kind of a globe behind the player, and there's a silver crosshairs to kind of show the point of impact, which is just a theme. It's not something that actually does anything. But the cards are gorgeous. Really high gloss cards, very well done, with some really good players. So very nice insert set. And then they have 99 Rewind. And this is a throwaway kind of insert. This is an insert card that it was very common in packs. There were 40 cards in the set, so these were sets that were intended to be collected at a very rapid pace. So there's nothing really distinctive that you would want to collect about it. There's an MVP for every team, and then at the end of the set, there are a bunch of MVPs for various categories. And that's about it. And then the only other thing they did for 2000 was their hats off cards. And these are memorabilia cards, and they are done like memorabilia cards. So for 2000, they brought it back and they did about as simple of a card set as you could do, which actually is exactly what Impact is supposed to be. And so it worked really well as that. But there really wasn't a place anymore for a card set like that. Now we were in a world where there was an expectation of parallels. There was an expectation of crazy inserts. And there was an expectation of rookies. That was the new world that we were in. And there was no place for Impact. So this was the last little gasp that we got. But fortunately, Impact, I mean, it really hit its height right at the end, the last two sets. 97 is so much fun, it's so dynamic. In 2000, this is a true Skybox card for football. This is a fantastic card. The card back may not have been all that great, but otherwise, the card's great. So if it's going to go out, it went out well, and I really like how they did. So that basically closes out Impact. I'll be looking at the rest of Premium, and I'll be eventually looking at Thunder at different times. But this is it's been a fun journey watching the different progressions. So definitely check out other videos I've done if you haven't had the chance. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.